Mom's 65th birthday was supposed to be unforgettable. I'd been planning it in my mind for months. Soft string lights draped across a cozy space, laughter echoing through the air, and family gathered close. But what I cared about most was the dessert, a special treat that would take Mom back to the afternoons we spent baking together when I was a kid. Of course, in true family fashion, my plans never stood a chance. Not once Claire got involved, with her opinions, her influence, and her endless money. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. Claire had always been the star. Since childhood, everything she touched turned to gold, or so it seemed. Ballet, elite schools, even her first business venture. Dad bankrolled it with the same money he once claimed he didn't have for my college tuition. Meanwhile, I was the shadow. The one who cleaned up after her recitals, who knew where the aprons were kept and how to fade into the background. They even joked I must have been born with one tied around my waist. So when Mom's milestone birthday approached, I didn't make a fuss. Quietly, I reached out to a renowned pastry chef I'd met at the small bakery where I work. I told him about a dessert Mom and I used to make, an almond lavender tart we baked the summer I turned 9. I saved for months just to afford it. Chef Lorenzo, generous and kind, agreed to recreate it for the party. When I mentioned the idea to Claire, she barely looked up. "You'd spend money on that?" she scoffed over brunch, eyeing me like I was a stray thought. "Emma, you can't even cover your own meals." Then she turned to Mom with a rehearsed smile and said, "Don't worry, I've already booked a luxury caterer. They're handling everything." And just like that, I disappeared again. Not a sister, not a daughter, just a bystander in thrift store shoes. The party itself was everything Claire envisioned, opulent, polished, staged for photos. The room shimmered in soft gold, and servers glided around with silver trays. Claire swept in like royalty, draped in a designer gown with a floral train trailing dramatically behind her. Dad rose to his feet and clapped like she'd just delivered a Nobel speech. I stayed close to Mom, adjusted her shawl, and kissed her cheek. "Happy birthday, Mama." She squeezed my hand, her smile tender, holding on a bit longer than usual. Claire grabbed the mic and launched into a long-winded toast, full of praise for herself and the sacrifices she made to throw the celebration. I stood quietly by the wall, hands wrapped around the small gift I brought, my dress secondhand and my heart already used to being overlooked. Then came the moment. A towering fondant-covered cake, Claire's, was wheeled out like a wedding sculpture. I heard her lean toward a friend and mutter, "Let's see Emma try to outdo that." But I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. Just as the guests were finishing their applause, the lights softened. A second cart emerged from the far end of the room, rolling slowly, purposefully. At its helm was Chef Lorenzo himself, dressed in his signature white jacket edged in gold. And on top of the cart sat our tart. Almond lavender, just like I remembered, delicately garnished with pressed edible flowers, a lacy ring of sugar bordering its edges. Simple. Elegant. Familiar. Gasps echoed. Mom stood before anyone else, her eyes instantly welling up. "Is that our tart?" she whispered. Claire's face drained of color. I stepped forward beside the chef. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said softly. "Some memories are too sweet to forget." Claire let out a brittle laugh. "Well, isn't that charming?" she said, trying to reclaim attention as guests swarmed around the tart, not her cake. The energy in the room had shifted. Cameras clicked, but they weren't focused on Claire's towering sugar sculpture, they were fixed on the quiet tribute that stirred something real. Mom was crying now, really crying. She reached out, tracing the edge of the crust like she was holding a memory. "Emma, how did you pull this off?" she asked, voice trembling. I smiled. "I just remembered how much it meant to you. I wanted you to taste a bit of your childhood again." Claire stood frozen, seething behind her carefully applied smile. I noticed it in her fingers first, the faint tremble, the way her forced smile clung to her face like something stitched too tight. Her extravagant cake, stacked like a showpiece and coated in gold dust and artificial roses, sat untouched at the far end of the table. It looked expensive, but it had no soul. Hers was for show. Mine was made of memory. Mine was love, baked into every layer. After the party, Chef Lorenzo pulled me aside. "You have more talent than you give yourself credit for, Emma," he said with a gentle nod. "Sometimes, all it takes is someone to remind you." Something shifted inside me in that moment. Quiet but permanent. I no longer saw myself as just the girl behind the counter or the helper at family gatherings. That part of me had faded. From there, the cracks started forming around Claire's perfect image. The first signs were subtle. Guests who once buzzed around her started drifting toward me, asking about the tart, the bakery where I worked, whether I ever took custom orders. Even Mom, who had spent her life defending Claire, called the next day. "Emma," she said, her voice almost hesitant. "I didn't realize how far you've come. I'm sorry if we didn't see it." Claire saw it too. She just couldn't accept it. 2 weeks later, she showed up unannounced at the bakery. She strolled in like she was inspecting a curiosity, sunglasses on indoors, attitude trailing behind her. "So, this is where you play chef," she said, sweeping her arm dramatically. "Cute. At least you're finally doing something useful." But I wasn't pretending anymore. By then, I was putting in long shifts under Chef Lorenzo, learning the fine details, presentation, flavor balancing, culinary chemistry. And what she didn't know was that he'd already nominated me for a scholarship I'd been dreaming of. Then came Dad's retirement party. Naturally, it was held at Claire's ultramodern house with its gleaming walls of glass and chandeliers that sparkled like a showroom ad. She greeted me with a patronizing smile. "Just bring bread," she said. The message was clear: stay in your lane. But I arrived carrying more than crusty rolls. I presented a handcrafted box painted with our family crest, and inside, an assortment of delicate mini tarts, variations on the almond lavender one Mom loved, now blended with hints of fig, honey, and cardamom. When Claire saw them, panic flared in her eyes. "You were supposed to bring bread," she hissed. "I did," I replied, pointing to the artisan rolls beside the box. "But I thought I'd also bring something for Dad." Before she could object, Mom reached for one. Then Dad. Then the room followed. Silence fell. Then a few smiles. Then hushed compliments. "Better than the hotel dessert," someone whispered. "This should be featured in a magazine," said another. Claire stood there, clenched and glittering in her sequined gown, her expression frozen as my creations captured the room. Later, she found me alone in the hallway. "What is this?" she snapped. "Your sad little comeback tour?" I met her eyes, calm. "No. Just the part where I stop waiting to be seen. You'll always be second best, Emma." I smiled gently. "Funny. Second place doesn't usually get asked to headline the governor's charity gala. But I did." She stopped cold. The gala was held at the Grand Mirabelle downtown, Claire's dream venue. She once said she'd host her wedding there, if she could afford it. Towering glass ceilings, marble floors polished like mirrors, and waiters gliding around in gloves so white they almost shimmered. It was also the governor's wife's favorite event of the year, and only the best chefs in the region were invited to participate. My name was printed in elegant gold script on the brochure. Emma Wilton, featured culinary artist. Not Claire's sister. Not the helper. Just me. While she posted selfies in borrowed cars, I was in the kitchen refining craft under pressure. While she labeled me a phase, I was learning how to leave a legacy. I wore a navy blue gown that night, fitted and quiet, adorned only with a thin line of pearls, sophisticated and unassuming, like my food. What I didn't expect. Claire showing up. She hadn't been invited, but somehow she slipped in through a mutual connection, pretending it was a happy accident. I caught sight of her scanning the ballroom, the rows of white and gold tablecloths, the guests clustered near the center display, my display. A glass pedestal held a centerpiece of almond lavender tarts dressed in sugar lace and hand-piped florals, a tribute to Mom's favorite recipe, reimagined, redefined. The governor's wife tried one, smiled, and immediately asked to meet me. As we spoke, I saw Claire trying to edge her way into the frame behind the photographers. She laughed too loud. No one looked. The spotlight had shifted. And she wasn't part of it. Later that night, I stepped outside for some air. Claire followed, her heels clicking behind me. "You think all this makes you better than me?" she hissed. I didn't flinch. "No. I think it means I finally don't need your approval." She crossed her arms. "You think baking makes you important? You really think people care about your homemade hobby?" I didn't have to respond, because right then, the event coordinator came outside, clipboard in hand. "Emma, Just confirming you're still okay to fly out for the Paris Culinary Showcase next month? They specifically requested you after last week's press. Claire's face broke. Paris, her dream. My ticket. And we'll issue your honorarium next week, he added. $25,000 for tonight's feature. He smiled and walked back inside. Claire stood frozen, trembling. This should have been me, she whispered. I looked at her, finally, and said the truth she never wanted to hear. You were too busy tearing me down to realize I was building something stronger. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Mom and Dad. We hadn't spoken much since the gala aired on TV, and especially not since they found out I was heading to Paris. We're proud of you, honey, Mom said, sounding awkward. We were wondering if maybe we could have dinner before your flight. At Claire's place. I already have plans, I replied. A pause. Maybe we could visit sometime then. Claire's been struggling. That's between you and Claire, I said. I spent years trying to earn a seat at your table. But I never needed it. I built my own. Then I sent them a small envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, elegantly embossed, with my name alone across the top. Emma Wilton, grand opening, Wildflower Bakery. The shop was fully funded by the prize money I'd earned. On the back of the invite was a handwritten note. You once said I was the family's shame. Now your friends ask if I'm free to cater. I arrived at the opening in a silver limo, not for show, but because the sponsor had included a driver. As I stepped out, cameras clicked. Inside, I saw people who used to ignore me now whispering my name like it was a brand. And then I saw them, my parents, clutching their invitation awkwardly, unsure whether to greet me or apologize. But they didn't have to speak. The room had already gone quiet. Because for the first time in my life, I was the headline. And I never needed their permission to shine, just the strength to keep going through the silence. Backhand index pointing right. Please subscribe for more stories like this, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from.